Hello and welcome to another Healthy Bite. My name is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Well, this week's episode we explore how we get hooked on things that we are constantly exposed to, particularly online of course, but how we get hooked, and also how to become indistractable. My guest this week is Nir Eyal, and Nir has written two books, coincidentally called Hooked and Indistractable. Now, in Hooked, for anybody who is developing online programs, or any program for that matter, and wanting it to become more engaging, Nir shares some great insights there with us about what that is and what he calls the hooked model. Now, there are 4 phases to the hooked model, and I'm going to read an extract from the book because we didn't go into it in a lot of detail in the podcast, but I did think this was particularly important. The first part is a trigger, and I'm reading from Nir Eyal's book, Hooked. A trigger is the actuator of behaviour, the spark plug in the engine. Triggers come in 2 types, external and internal. Habit-forming products start by alerting users with external triggers. For example, suppose Barbara is a young woman in Pennsylvania who happens to see a photograph in her Facebook newsfeed taken by a family member from a rural part of the state. It's a lovely picture, and because she is planning a trip there with her brother Johnny, the external trigger's call to action in marketing and advertising lingo intrigues her, and she clicks. By cycling through successive hooks, users begin to form associations with internal triggers, which attach to existing behaviours and emotions. When users start to automatically cue their next behaviour, the next habit becomes part of their everyday routine. Over time, Barbara associates Facebook with her need for social connection. The next phase is action. Following the trigger comes the action, the behaviour done in anticipation of a reward. The simple action of clicking on the interesting picture in her newsfeed takes Barbara to a website called Pinterest, a social bookmarking site with a virtual pinboard. Once Barbara completes the simple action of clicking on the photo, she is dazzled by what she sees next. The next phase is the variable reward. What distinguishes the hook model from the plain vanilla feedback loop is the hook's ability to create a craving. Feedback loops are all around us, but predictable ones don't create desire. The unsurprising response of your fridge light turning on when you open the door doesn't drive you to keep opening it again and again. However, add some variability to the mix. Suppose a different treat magically appears in your fridge every time you open it, and voila, intrigue is created. Variable rewards are one of the most powerful tools companies implement to hook users. Research shows that levels of the neurotransmitter dopamine surge when the brain is expecting a reward. Although dopamine is often wrongly categorized as making us feel good, introducing variability does create a focused state which suppresses the areas of the brain associated with judgment and reason, while activating the parts associated with wanting and desire. Sounds familiar. The final phase is investment. The last phase of the hook model is where the user does a bit of work. The investment phase increases the odds that the user will make another pass through the cycle in the future. The investment occurs when the user puts something into the product of service such as time, data, effort, social capital, or money. However, the investment phase isn't about users opening up their wallets and moving on with their day. Rather, the investment implies an action that improves the service for the next go-around. Inviting friends, stating preferences, building virtual assets, learning to use new features are all investment users make to improve their experience. So I think it's a really interesting one because in case you're ever wondered about the psychology that goes into the development of these technologies, and let's face it, we are living in an attention economy that's constantly our attention is being vied for, and all of these free offerings that we have thrown at us constantly, they may not actually be free, because what we provide is in return data, and there's a cost-benefit relationship there. And to be honest, a lot of the time it's a really positive exchange. I think. I mean, I use Google a lot, and I know there may well be data gathered from my searches, and that will certainly lead to algorithms that might promote certain ads cropping up on my Google searches. I've noticed that. I'm sure you all have as well. So that's the payback, if you like, that people mining our data equipment, our data about what it is we're interested in, then throws up things which are for sale, and that's how Google and Facebook, obviously, that's their business model. So it is very interesting to gain an insight. And also, if you are creating something in this field, it's a great instructive book about that. And it's certainly one that I'm reading and have read, and I find a really interesting insight into how that attention economy works from the developer's side. So that was one thing, but Indistractable is I don't know whether it's the flip side of the same coin. While you are being hooked, well, you should also be aware of how to become indistractable. And I think one of the things we can all agree on is that the technology that we are exposed to in this day and age. So I think there is one thing we can agree, and that is the technology that we are exposed to is all pervasive. It's there all the time, and the whole idea of internal and external triggers explores that theme. And I guess one of the biggest internal triggers is this one of fear of missing out, and the need, because you have just received a text or an email, that you must immediately respond to that. And it's natural that we should. We're very social creatures. It's actually the biggest strength we have as a species, our sociability and our ability to collaborate and communicate. In fact, that's the part of the topic of my next book, which is called Evolution Bites Back. But I digress. And our ability to communicate is an important feature of our species. But of course, when we get devices that allow us to communicate with people instantaneously from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world, it kind of becomes almost a habit that you respond to that straight away. So learning how not to be distracted, and Nir puts the alternative, the opposite side of being indistractable is traction. The opposite of indistraction is traction. Doing stuff that we want to do, that we have set ourselves to do, that we find meaningful to do. And this is where the conversation goes in an exploration of values and the importance of scheduling. Now, when he talks about values, I thought it was great. There were so many pearls in this. It really is worth a listen, because when he talks about values, he identifies 3 areas of values that I think we can all relate to. One is a personal value. You yourself. What is important to you in your life in terms of your health, how you live your life, how you lead your life, the things you will do, the things you will consume, how long you sleep, and all of those things that relate directly to you. The second part of values that he asks us to explore is relationships. And of course, we've talked about this many times before when we've been referencing the work of Martin Seligman in conversations that I've had with the wonderful Dr. Susie Green from the Positivity Institute, where we talk about the PERMA model of being positive, engaging, relationships, meaning, and accomplishments. And of course, the last one that he's added is health, H, PERMA. And relationships are key. I mean, the longest study that has ever been done on health and wellness from Harvard Medical School over 75 years shows that relationships are the biggest indicator, the biggest predictor, the best predictor of our longevity, health and well-being. And that, if you are fortunate enough to have a significant other, that's great, but it involves whatever connections you have with friends, with family, with clubs, with churches, with choirs, whatever, at work, of course. And the third value that he explores, that he asks us to explore, is work. And I thought it was great when he referred to work as being reactive or reflective. And if you have ever sat down in your desk and started the day by checking your emails and found yourself going down a rabbit hole that has suddenly swallowed up 2 or 3 hours, if not the whole day, then that is a very reactive way of working. And a reflective way of working is working on something that you consider to be important, that you've set yourself tasks to perform, and you work through those work situations. And the key to all of that is setting aside times, scheduling through the day. And I thought that was really important and interesting, because scheduling is not something we are all drawn to. He's very disparaging about to-do lists, and I don't blame him. To-do lists tend to grow longer and longer all the time, and I think the to-do list, somebody once said to me, if a to-do list is on a post-it note any bigger than this, and I'm holding up something that is marginally bigger than a postage stamp, then it's not going to be very effective. You shouldn't be creating long to-do lists, which you are setting yourself up for failure. But scheduling in your values into a working day is important. And that's an interesting way of organising your life and dealing with all of the potential distractions in our modern world. So it was such an interesting podcast, such an interesting interview. They are 2 very excellent books, which I think in this modern world are almost a must read. I certainly think the Indistractable one is one that we should all be engaging with, because technology is not going away anytime soon, and the distractions are only going to become greater and greater as technology gets to know us better as individuals. I talked to Nir about the work of Yuval Noah Harari, who makes the point that one of the biggest challenges in our relationship with technology is that technology will actually know us better than we know ourselves. And you might think, well, how might that be? But if we're making decisions about what we like to do, what we like to buy, what we like to eat, what we like to see, where we like to travel, our memory is only so good. But with all of the data that's been entered into our technology, arguably, given remembering what movies we saw, what restaurants we've eaten at, all of that information is embedded in the data we've shared, then it's quite possible that technology would end up knowing us better than we know ourselves. And Nir makes a very compelling argument for that not being the case, and for us actually to stand there and assess what values are important to us and to take control of it. And I think that is going to be our biggest challenge. I look at my grandchildren, and I look at how they interact already at the age of 3 and 5 with technology. And I have to say, one of the biggest challenges for parents growing up, parents grow up with their children. I certainly did with mine. Parents going forward is how to responsibly interact with technology and to guide them through that process. And it doesn't matter whether you're a 3, a 5-year-old, a 20-year-old, or a 60-year-old, that is a challenge for us all. So having some kind of structure and some kind of framework around which to work through that together, well, as an individual, but together as a family, is really important. So I thought it was a terrific conversation on a very, very important topic. I mean, when we talk about being stressed, technology has so many positives attached to it, but it has the potential for so many negatives, and we're certainly seeing how easily distracted people are. You only have to be sitting in a restaurant, and you will often see couples or families sitting there, and they're actually each on their own devices. You'll be in a busy in any public place and you will see people with their heads down in their devices. So we are becoming more and more connected with the world out there, but we're not connecting with the person next to us and the people that are important to us. And if we haven't learned one thing, we've learned many things in this pandemic, but one of the most important lessons I think we can all agree on is that connection with real people is what makes us human. Anyway, I thought I would just share that with you, encourage you to check it out. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences and conclusions.